Hello, and welcome back to the Triangle Business Podcast. It is the new year, and I am one of your co-hosts, Joey Nattel, followed by
Happy New Year. I'm Scott Moore.
hello, y'all. So we are back, and we're here to kick off our first episode of the year. And, everybody around this kind of time has New Year's resolutions, which typically don't last, or they'll have goals. And for those lucky few, sometimes they do last at least until Valentine's Day. And eventually we're going to talk about some of those things, and they may come up today. But we're going to mainly focus on a topic that we believe that a lot of people struggle with, or especially in the beginning of your business, if not later when you transition to different phases, which is, I think the overall topic would be boundaries in a way. And
Yeah,
like, are you giving too much? Are you not giving enough? An expression I'll use is, are you giving the farm away or just the cow?
right.
Or
And
vice versa.
also, if you work on a team,
Yes.
does your client facing parts of the team set proper boundaries and expectations that you as the business owner are going to be happy with?
Yes. Do you communicate
Yeah,
those limits and what to do, when to do it? Maybe not exactly, but like, what's the general ballpark and do they understand?
right.
Kind of thing. I love that.
Well, I've
Um,
had numerous clients over the years be like, well, my salesperson told them that we could do X for Y amount of money. And I don't see how we're going to make a profit if we do X at Y amount of money. But now I can't go back and renegotiate that with the customer because the salesperson already told them. I'm like, oh, well, I mean, we probably shouldn't operate at a loss or, operate with no profit. But
mhm.
also, why did that ever happen? Why didn't we have good enough communication with our salesperson so that they know what the boundaries are for what we can offer for what price?
Yes, I agree. For sure. Um, that's always an interesting one. Like if that was always a thing in corporate America, like if it's in writing and if somebody says it, you got to hold them to it. Except when they don't, and that doesn't feel very good in larger
Yeah.
companies. But in smaller companies, it's just us. It's different in a lot of
Well, yeah, I
ways.
mean, if your company is
Yeah.
just one person,
Yes.
I think that when we were bantering before the episode started, we said, does your customer service team know what your boundaries are? And if you are your own customer service team, then do you know what your boundaries are?
I love that. And that might be the title of this episode because I love it so much. But that's an interesting topic kind of thing. Like I've got some questions here I drew up as like, does your clients actually know your boundaries? Have you expressed that kind of
I
thing?
I think mine typically do.
Yeah.
Like I'm usually pretty explicit with like this is how I operate and this is what I expect from you. And is everybody enthusiastically consenting to that?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think that I think actually I threw that question out to the listeners who like we have to have those conversations because it's just us and our clients. And like, because I've learned the hard way that if you don't, everybody becomes unhappy campers because things will come up and be like, but we didn't talk about that. I'm like, ooh, add that to the list of the contract you sign when you work with me. Typically, or it's gonna be a conversation point for sure. Your
Well, I mean,
clients,
sorry, I was just gonna elaborate by saying we should at no point pretend that this only applies to people that like coaches or people that do what we do. Like in fact, in some ways, I see it much more obviously in some other industries. Like one of the ones that I see it with a lot is realtors,
yes.
right? You want to talk about like iffy boundaries. Most realtors I know spend a certain amount of time answering emails or texts like after 9 p.m. in the evenings or on the weekends.
Hmm.
And like, I get it, right? A lot of home transaction stuff happens on the weekends because that's often when your clients are available to go look at stuff outside of their 9 to 5.
Oh yeah.
But um, one of the things I've seen them do is like in their email signature, it says, if you send your email, after 2 p.m., then I promise it will be answered by tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. You know, but right, or various boundaries like that, and then but they don't stick to them often because when the client has a question and they're urgent about it, they're like, well, I got to answer this question. And maybe that's not even an appropriate boundary to have in that industry. If you're like, well, if I don't respond right away, we could lose this house. And that's the whole point of the exercise, is to, get somebody the house that they want or sell the house that they're trying to sell.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot on the line. But I mean, at some point that business is running you, not you running the business. So
Yes.
figuring out what those boundaries should be.
That
Um,
that brings up two questions when you said that, like when the business is running you versus you running the business. And I like to get back to the farm analogy question in a moment. But like, how do you know when the business is running you versus you running the business? What are like either signs or tips or like,
for me, one of the ones that I look at um, is there anything I'm starting to dread
mm,
about the work?
yes.
Like, is this somebody I really don't want to be talking to?
Hmm.
Because I'm usually really good at filtering, like, do I want to spend a bunch of time with this person? Like
Hmm.
I say it all the time, but I'll say it here once again. I only work with people I like because I don't know how to coach somebody I don't like.
Yes. Yes.
I'm very fortunate because I like most people.
Yes.
If I don't like you, you're probably a big piece of crap. But
Yes.
because I like most people.
Hmm.
Um, but somebody out there is asking themselves, like, how come he doesn't call me anymore? Um, but uh,
Yeah.
but like it's necessary for me to like you, and I'm usually willing to go very, very far for people
Hmm.
I like. And quite honest, to be like real frank about it, like people I love, right? To me, it's it's even easier in some respects for me to love somebody than to like them. But I don't work with people I don't like. And consequently, if I start noticing that like I'm not looking forward to these calls or these meetings, I start asking myself, like, what's that about? Like, am I feeling for some reason like I'm failing this person? Is there some topic that really needs to get talked about that I haven't been willing to bring up with them? And if that's the truth, then I write that down in big bold letters. And the next call, I'm like, look, I've been avoiding talking to you about this, and we got to talk about it because otherwise I don't know if we can continue. And and so there's stuff there that to me that's the guardrail that, like, if I start to feel like I'm not looking forward to this, then I think that that's a sign that the business is running me. Like, well, if I keep doing it now, I'm just doing it for the money, and that's not great. Hey Joey, for whatever reason you're muted.
Oh,
Touch
thanks for
something.
letting me know.
Yeah,
Glad we caught that early.
it would have been a
Um,
much more boring podcast
oh
if I
yes, yes.
couldn't hear you.
Um, I like that a lot. And that really, kind of the concept of how you do one thing is how you do everything. Or in this case, it feels like that can apply to a lot of areas of life. A lot of ways, like what are you avoiding? Or, what are you dreading kind of thing? Either that's in your romantic relationships or your friendships. Like, "Ah, I really don't want to hang out with this friend. Like, what is that about? Do you like them or do they just like you? Kind of thing. And
Maybe.
yeah. And so I mean, we can go in a whole rabbit hole conversation on
Yeah.
that entirely. Maybe
Well,
another episode.
one of the things that prompted this conversation is we were talking about, like, when we're having conversations with people who, let's say, aren't our clients.
Right.
And what is the boundary where you stop giving them value for free?
Yeah. And like the mindset that I kind of walked into starting my practice was like be a good person, like give, help people because I got into this profession because I like to help people. That's
Mhm.
what every therapist says. I don't know about every coach, but a lot of coaches who are in this kind of work.
Certainly is. That works for me.
Yeah. And so, like, I want to help people, I want to be of service. Makes me feel good, makes them feel good, it makes the world better, all those kind of things. And so, I guess I started to believe the idea, which I think is still true to a certain extent, is just like, keep giving. Like, I guess the guy idea of law of karma, like, be a good person and it's going to come back to you in a positive way. Be a not so good person is you're going to regret it. Whether, burning
I
bridges or things
I
like
have
that.
some concerns about how well the system is working, but go on.
Yes, I agree. But I also would challenge that by saying, like, it's not the time, like, when the bad things come back to you, it's not on a timeline you would expect, per se. But that's a whole philosophical conversation we're not going to get into today. Um,
I'm a big believer. I'm probably going to get the quote wrong, but I think it was Martin Luther King who said the arc of uh the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice.
yes.
It's just sometimes it's really, really long.
Yeah. And so that's basically
So
you picked out what I was
anyway,
putting down.
we'll have a deep philosophical conversation about that either on the podcast or over beers or
Yeah,
both
sounds great.
at some point. But
So the idea of just giving, helping, and in my experience of coaching, and I would say in some services, like it's kind of what you got to do. Makes you think of something Alex Hormozy said, which I like some of his stuff, and we're not talking about him today, but I saw a video of him one time say that like, oh, well, what's the desired amount of money you want to make? And if you've never started a business before, you set that goal of like, let's just say it's $100 or $1,000 for easy math.
okay.
And like the first thing you charge is free. It's 100% off.
Hmm.
And you get those a couple, and you get some wins, reviews, whatever like that, some recognition, and then you go to 90% off or 95% off, and then you go up and up. And so the concept that came to mind in our conversation, which was this idea of like, how do you know when you're giving too much away, like giving the whole farm away versus just a cow? Versus like, how do you know when you're not giving enough value and you're actually like, because I've seen businesses that do that. And sometimes like I've even worked for some contract gigs, which I've had the opportunity to work with people I don't like because I didn't get to choose the clients. And that was a stretch, let me tell you.
Yeah, I was going to say how did that go?
Taught me a lot about myself. That's for
Yeah.
sure. It really challenged my ability to coach, but also realized like I'm not going to do this forever kind of thing. So, that's what got me through it. Like I chose this. I chose
That
this.
the question of like, how do I know if I'm not giving enough value? I mean, well, so first of all,
Mhm.
if we're talking about a not client relationship,
Yes.
I'm completely unconcerned about
Right.
whether I'm giving enough value. They're not my client. There's
Yes.
no exchange happening. Like, I, if I'm trying to be helpful to them about whatever situation they're discussing,
Hmm.
um, then and they're not paying me, I'm just like, I'm doing the best I can.
Hmm.
I mean, I would say uh, there's situations where I've told people like the complexities of what you're dealing with are significant and I don't understand them all.
Hmm.
And and so any advice I gave you would probably be bad advice based on incomplete information. And the
Hmm.
only way that I could spend enough time with you to get that information would be if you want to work with me. But
Yeah.
those are rare situations compared to like the ones, I mean, I have conversations all the time where like this is what's going on at my job or this is what's going on with my business and what do you think? And I don't even usually stop to think much about it. I just am like, oh, let me offer you my thoughts on that and let's talk about it. Like I use the same kind of guardrail where it's like if at some point I'm like, I'm no longer really enjoying this conversation. Um, there's a couple of instances I can think about where that has happened.
Yeah.
And mostly they're the ones where I go, well, the first thing I'd probably do is this. And they're like, yeah, I've already tried that. And
Uh,
then the next thing I'd probably do is this, like, no, that won't work. And if they're like, I'm like, okay, well, those are my two from the hip ideas.
yeah.
Like if they're batting down all the suggestions or they seem like they're not even willing to try some things, then
Hmm.
I that usually makes me stop enjoying the conversation. I'm like, well, that's all I can really think of. But I'll let you know if something else comes to mind. Hey, I'm gonna go get another drink.
Do you know what that's called?
What's that called?
Actually, that comes from the book. Well, it doesn't come from a book. It's a concept in psychology and therapy where it's like, yes, but.
Oh, yes, but
It's a
yeah.
common trap, actually, where people want to stay. Those are the people who fight for their limitations and get to keep them.
Sure.
Have you tried this? Yeah, I tried that, but it didn't work. How about this? Yeah, but no. Yes,
Mhm.
but no. But yeah, those are the most frustrating
I want to
people
be
to
really
deal with.
clear. Those I can actually bring them to mind because they're the exceptions. Most of
Correct.
the time, you know, uh, I'm smart enough to go, well, you've tried this, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, good. I just wanted to make sure you tried that. But like where I start coming up with a couple of things and they're like, oh, that's an interesting way of looking at that, or maybe I could try that. And like, then the conversation feels valued and it feels good. And I'm like, well, great. And I was like, if you want to talk about it some more, let me know.
Hmm.
And that doesn't even mean set up a sales call with me.
Right.
But if I think like, no, you could be a good client for me, and I really enjoy my experience of interacting with you. But like if they need another I mean, sometimes there's people I just absolutely love. And I'm like, anytime you want to talk about this, let me know. I'm happy to chat with you some more. And that's genuinely said. I never say that when I don't mean it.
Hmm.
And um and then we'll talk some more and sometimes that turns into a business relationship or sometimes it doesn't. But to your earlier point about karma, what I've noticed is if I have a couple of those conversations and they're like either, you know, that fixed the problem or, you know, that made the problem better in some way, that's somebody who's likely to refer me to somebody else
Hmm.
at some point. Um, and I think I've mentioned before on the podcast that like I've had people get to the end of one of those conversations and say, you know, can I send you some money for this conversation?
Yes.
And my answer is no. So back to boundaries, right? Like
Yeah.
you were not my client when we started the conversation, and I did not treat this as an obligation to produce value for you.
Hmm.
So no, you may not pay me. If you would like to have an ongoing coaching relationship, let's talk about what that would look like, and then you can pay me all the time, and I'll help you all the time.
Yes.
But I don't accept money from people when we didn't go into the conversation with
Hmm.
a prearranged agreement that they're a client.
Oh, yes. I love that. And I have been utilizing that since I've heard such wise wisdom from you in that. And it leads me to come kind of another thought on the topic, which is I guess it's the concept of like, there's a couple thoughts rolling around my head where it's just like, oh, continue to give, 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 and be of service, but also like, I guess this concept of like attracting clients or connections versus chasing, if you will. And just when I just we're on the same page with the audience, my idea of chasing is like kind of cold calling, be like, "Hi, my name is Joey. Want to buy my stuff?" It's kind of the extreme example of it. Versus had a client recently who just found me on the internet, never met him, and that feels like the ultimate like they come to me, if you will.
Yeah,
And so like, but when it comes to like friendships or like you meet people in person kind of thing, there's dynamic of like one thing is like not necessarily like how do you make your friends your clients per se, because that doesn't feel great. It feels like it needs to be their idea versus when it's the idea of like holding the boundary. I guess it's the conversation of like, hey, it sounds like you really need a lot of help and attention in here. When you be like, do you want to continue this in a more professional setting? When to know that. I guess that's a professional boundary versus like personal boundary of like, this is what I do for a living. And this kind of reminds me of some of our conversations we've had in the past episodes where I'll ask somebody a question and be like, I'll answer that for 500 bucks. I'm like, ooh, that was kind of, I'm sorry I asked. Like, please forgive me. Like, I mean, step on your toes
Right.
here. It was just an ignorant question. And that might have been my reaction. Like, kind of feel like I got a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's just like, I guess, learning the art and the gracefulness on how to handle
Well,
those delicate things. 'Cause I feel delicate. Maybe that's just my own stuff coming up.
I just realized when you were talking about that I have like a slight mental hang up that I think it actually sort of explains a lot about me. So thank you for this insight, Joey.
You're welcome.
But like when you talked about like just be a giver and, go into these conversations giving value, I realize I don't, I think historically, I don't even really regard that as being a giver because
Mm,
I'm like, well, I'm enjoying this conversation as much as the other person is, and I'm enjoying
mhm,
feeling the closeness between us draw together. That like they're often sharing sharing concerns about a problem, and that is vulnerability, and
mhm.
that allows me to be more vulnerable with that person and have a better, closer relationship with them. And I'm like, I feel I don't necessarily come away from those conversations feeling like I gave anything. I feel like I just have a warmer, more connected relationship with them.
Yeah.
And maybe I should think of it, at least on some level, as giving.
Yeah.
Um, you know, give myself credit, as it were, for that. But
Yes.
um, I don't really think of it that way. But like again, boundaries wise, if I'm like, this has stopped feeling good, it doesn't, I don't, because like in that situation where like they're batting things away, I'm like, oh, this is feels like it's actually driving us further apart
Mhm.
because I'm starting to regard you as somebody that is not receptive to new ideas. And I'm starting to feel like what I'm offering isn't valuable or appreciated.
Mhm.
And like at the absolute core of my being, the two ways I like to feel the most are helpful and appreciated. And
Yeah.
so if I feel like this isn't being helpful and it's not really appreciated, it immediately starts having me think I'm making the relationship worse in this conversation. So the best thing to do is stop it. Um,
Mm.
I mean, and I was sitting here thinking, mm, there's probably a lot of other industries where you do encounter this to some degree, but there's also stuff where no, like, our buddy Jonathan that we had on, who's the contractor, like, he's
Yeah.
probably not like accidentally building your deck for you
No,
because
absolutely.
he's in a conversation with you, right?
Yes.
But he
Yes.
might be in fact, I'm going to talk about him in a way that I think he would approve of if he was here.
Yes.
But he literally helped me get started on the foundations of my shops and showed me some stuff because of his expertise as a contractor that I would have never thought of,
Yes.
and recommended some tools that made that job so much easier.
Yes.
And he was just like, no, I'm just doing this as a friend. But again, does that make me more likely to like want to help him out, want to refer business to him?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So
It's called the law of reciprocity,
yeah,
actually.
absolutely.
The more you give. Now, I also want to have a distinction here that when I was saying, oh, giving of service, as you were saying this, it did remind me of like, what's the come from? Is it coming from like, I just want your money. I just want your money. I just want your money. Let me do what I'm supposed to do, which is give, give, give. That's not the kind of place I
Right.
was referring to with my question, just so the audience can understand. Because you're right, like you are getting something from it. They're giving, there's an exchange, appreciation, if you will. Because if you move from, oh, what's the expression? When you move from appreciation to expectation, it no longer is a relationship, it's a transaction
Okay.
to a certain degree. And so I like that little saying because it
Yeah.
reminds me of just like, am I appreciating this? Are they appreciating me? Is
Yeah.
there a mutual
Well, but
appreciation happening?
and I I want to be really clear that I'm not in any way bad wronging something that's transactional. Like the world we live in is largely transactional. And that doesn't mean that that's the pinnacle of human existence. It just means like, when I'm hiring a exterminator, I'm probably not trying to create a deep, warm personal relationship with them. I'm like, I have bugs. I want them dead.
No,
Will you
that's
come
just
kill my
right. Yeah.
bugs?
I guess I
Yeah.
meant in the context of like this might spill over more into friendships and romantic relations. So I think that saying is more appropriate, I
Yeah.
think, than just by me going into what I do mode is we are in the business of relationships and well, I want to like who I want to work with as well, kind of thing. So, but yeah, there's that idea of giving versus like, are you giving too much kind of thing. So I like your perspective where you talk about like, oh, this is, am I dreading this? Does this feel good? And as you were saying that, it made me think of an idea of like, which is me stuff, is like, am I being taken advantage of potentially? Is
Hmm.
somebody like just using me? Because that's happened to me a lot. I've had a lot of clients, some other, mostly in the kind of contract gigs where I did not necessarily like get to choose them.
Uh,
And they'll ask me for a lot more than I probably should have been giving them, and that never felt kind of good. And I kind of had to learn that lesson. So when out in the world, kind of thing, I think that was kind of like the what came to mind is like not necessarily just our business, because but other kind of things is like what are signs of people in the world that you work with or experience where like you like one fix could be like just change your prices because you're giving the farm away kind of
mhm.
thing. That may be one fix. Or like, hey, you can have like multiple tier services where it's just like there's a higher price because you're rebuilding a house for the price of building a shed. Does that make sense? Kind of thing.
Well, so one thing I'll just interject about all this, right?
Sure.
I want the people who are listening to this, who are like the solopreneurs, to really hear this one thing if they don't get anything else from the rest of this podcast. When a business gets bigger, your your hard costs, especially for things like payroll, any brick and mortar you're paying for, equipment, any of that stuff, start to become rigid or significant in a
Mm,
way that will drive your boundaries.
mm,
We can't do it for less than this because this is how much it costs.
right.
And but while we are the practitioners who are servicing everything,
Mm,
it's very easy to let that get way out of whack. Um, uh, uh, it's bringing to mind like a funny story from years ago. It can't This comes up in my Facebook memories every year,
yep.
and it was when my daughter was in middle school, and she
Hmm.
goes, "We have a class assignment to make a business, and we have to show the business plan." And then we're gonna like do business with the other classmates in our classroom. I was like, this seems like a great experiment.
Yeah. I
And
wish I was taught that.
I was like, tell me about your business. And she's like, we're going to make ice cream. I'm like, awesome. And I said, what's your marketing plan? She goes, we don't need one. Everybody loves ice cream. And I'm like, again, the business coach part of me is being triggered right now, but I'm just like, okay. But one of the things I said, what's your labor cost? And she said, there is no labor cost. We'll just do it. We're just going to make the ice cream. And I was like, from the mouths of babes, right? Like so many people I've met over the years are like,
Yep.
well, I mean, obviously I'll just do it because there's no cost to my labor.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I bet you there is
Yeah.
eventually a cost to that
Yeah.
labor.
Yeah.
At a minimum, there's an opportunity cost. Like if you weren't making ice cream, you could be doing something else.
Well, that's very true. Yeah, and that makes me think of something I've struggled with my own practice is like not only just price of worth and limiting beliefs associated with that, but just like like making a price. And it makes me think of the story, which you've heard before, but I'll share it with the audience if they haven't heard it. Is there's a, let's say it's a supply chain. It breaks down. Everything stops all of a sudden. And they call the expert in. The expert looks around. He asks a bunch of questions and talks to a couple people. And then he takes one wrench and turns one screw, and everything works again. Have you heard this before? And he's like, "Oh my God, wow, thank you so much. Like, how much that be?" He was like, "That's $10,000." Like, $10,000? All you did was turn one screw. He's like, "Yeah, but it also like you're not paying for the turning of a screw. You're paying for like the 30 years of experience. I know which screw to turn,
Right.
kind of thing." And that's that concept of like sometimes in the business that we're in, I've experienced with newer coaches as well, or other related fields. Us is just like sometimes people get hung up on the hourly cost versus like you're not just paying for what I'm doing, you're paying for all the years of wisdom and experience I have, kind of thing. So I really like that concept because that kind of to me it just drives into a deeper point of like there's always a cost behind the scenes. You may not have like for some businesses it's not always like a well it costs this much for wood, it costs this much for like cement kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's such an easy trap to fall into to like undervalue your services. And also, what the I want to be really clear about one other thing. This does not mean that you can't do any pro bono work.
Oh, of course not. Yeah.
Like, but one of my dear friends that I worked with years ago, I offered him a price, which was a well below market price. And he said, that seems like a big heart, bad business decision, uh, Scott. And I said, well, friend, it's my business. And if somebody's going to make a bad decision about it, it'll be me. But I learned from that, and I use this with my clients all the time. I say, I'm fine if you want to make a big heart, bad business decision, but only make one at a time.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. I mean, and be like really clear, like, this is my big heart, bad business decision I'm making right here. So, like, when it comes to the question of boundaries and giving, like, I don't care. Like, sometimes, give till it hurts and just be like, I'm just gonna make a bad business decision about this one, but I'm going to be real conscious that I'm making it so that not every interaction becomes like that.
I like that. I think that's the big takeaway I've heard from that piece of the conversation right now. It's just like walk in it eyes wide open because you're doing yourself a disservice if you're just like, oh no, I'm not doing anything wrong, closing my eyes to it. So I like that. That just brings awareness to like your relationships, to your worth and where you're going, kind of thing. So
Well, I
that's
mean, look, especially in the business that we're in,
oh
like
yes,
if if we're not willing to call ourselves out on our own bullshit, then
yes,
how are we supposed to do that for our clients, which is one of the things that they really expect from us.
absolutely.
Uh,
That's very true.
so,
That makes sense. I think I would like to share a tool with the audience
oh,
about
okay, cool.
boundaries, kind of thing. This is one thing I like to teach people. And this can be used, and I may have shared it before, but I'm going to share it again in this episode. Since we're loosely on the topic of boundaries, but relevant to this kind of is more, this is good for family. This is good for friends. This is good for your romantic partners. This is really good for your employees in a lot of
If it's
ways.
good for family, Joey, why didn't you share it before Christmas?
Well, well, we decided the topic on that. Well,
Everybody's going to be like, where was this a month ago?
it's funny because I give a talk on this. I used to for another contract company, and it was always during Christmas, like how to hold healthy boundaries for
Nice.
family. And I would teach this because it was so relevant. Because a lot of people, when they think of boundaries, and I guess we'll define it really quickly, just to give a little context, is like, what's the difference between a request and a boundary? Have we talked about this before?
I can't remember if we did. Let's talk about it
It's
now.
an interesting distinction, and I've heard it come from J-Man Relationships. That's where I got it from. I love his stuff, and he uses the example, and I'll share it with you. It's just like I don't know, say a couple is fighting, and they had an argument and they yelled and shouted and said each other's names and they make up, they come back together. And let's say the lady in the relationship was like, hey, just so you know, next time you start yelling, I just want you to know I'm going to go in the next room by myself for like 10, 15 minutes to cool down. And he's going to probably say, or one of the other partner will say, like, why don't you just tell me not to yell? And she's like, because that would be a request, not a boundary. And under this definition, a boundary is something that you can follow through versus requesting someone else to do it because you can't control them. Now, physically you can, but we're not going to talk about that. Right. So I think it was an
I think
interesting,
that's an important and interesting distinction. I think where in that particular situation, my inclination would, if somebody's yelling, I might say, "Hey, could you stop yelling, please?"
that's still a
And
request.
which is a request.
Yes.
And then if they continue to do it, I'm going to be like, "Well, I can control myself. I'm going to get out of here."
Exactly. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so like
So
you
I
let
I think
them
I tend
know.
to do the one then the other.
You can do both.
Okay.
Yeah. And like that's was like you're getting ahead because like I'm digging on the science, you're doing the art.
Okay.
Because now you're marrying the two, and that's really the kind of the healthy thing down the road, which we can talk about another time, probably on a full another episode. But I wanted to bring that up because a lot of people, when they're like, "You're crossing my boundaries," and people think about, they get really scared of boundaries because they're like, "Hey, stop it! I don't like that you're doing that." And how's that going to react? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Now
Right.
you're fighting. So you come at it with big, loud, or potentially angry energy. You're going to be met with that kind of thing. So this is a simple framework that I was taught, and I share it to the world because I think the world needs to hear it because it's super helpful. And it gives you kind of a blueprint of like when things get messy, how to have a boundary conversation. Step one, get agreement. Hey, I'd like to talk about something really important. Are you open to talking about that? If they say no, you they already tell you who they are and what they want from you. They're not interested. It's something really important about a relationship or a work relation. Now, when it comes to a boss and employee, they don't always really have control, but give them control of what day to talk, unless it's like this week or this day.
Mhm.
But give them as much autonomy as you can. Don't be like, you're going to talk to me at 2 p.m. today. No, not cool. I mean, depending on the type of business you have. So they get agreement. Step two, handle the objections first. This requires you to know what they're going to say potentially. I will give I'll give the example that my mentor taught me because it's more relevant to business. And I'll tell you the story. So he had an employee, he was in the seminar business, and he had people work for him. And one of the benefits of working for them is they were all coaches, and sometimes they could get clients on the side, and it wouldn't impede on the business. It was just kind of a perk. You could potentially get that into your own business. So what he was doing was he was actually selling the seminar work at like a fraction of the cost,
Okay.
which one pulls money away from. It was really affecting the other coaches because everybody went to him,
Got it.
less so than the business, but it did affect the business to a certain degree. So you need to have a boundary conversation with him. And when he did and would, typical what would happen is this guy would be like, but I'm a lifer for this company. Don't you know I have the top sales numbers? And he would. All those things were true. And so what happened is versus having this big conversation, we get into the weeds about something that had nothing to do with what you wanted to talk about. And now you're all frustrated, angry, and pissed off, and you don't even want to talk about them anymore. So sometimes it requires a couple of these conversations, and that's not always easy, but just be aware of that because you don't always know what they're going to say. And if you know them well enough, you know what they're going to say. So it'd be like, to handle the objections looks like, hey, let's just say he's called Stan. Stan, we can both agree that you're a lifer for this company. Yes. Well, yeah. I was like, yeah, I definitely agree. You as the boss would say. Second, like, we can both agree that you have the best sales numbers, right? Like, we both agree with that. Well, yeah. This is important that you get their agreement or at least acknowledge it.
Mhm.
Step number three, give them a compliment from the heart. Kind of what you say, give them hearable praise. more specifically.
Yeah.
Don't be like, your hair looks nice. Be fake. They're going to know it. And you've immediately broken rapport and trust. And this is a waste of your time. Step number four, explain the violation, preferably in I and feel statements, but that's mostly in romantic and friendships. Um, you do need the word to use you because you did break this violation. Could be crossing boundaries, hurt feelings, something. This is not the time to unleash your emotions on them. Preferably you've premeditated and kind of have a concise way of expressing it. Step number five, how do they win? Like, what is the ideal outcome that is a win-win, preferably? But like in this situation, he was just like, hey, you're just taking these numbers kind of thing. It's affecting the business. Now, what he inevitably would did is just like, what? Once again, I'm a lifer of the company. I'm a top salesperson. Be like, Stan, I agree. We both agreed to that, remember? That's not what
Right.
this conversation is
That's not
about.
what it's about.
That
Yeah.
gives you permission to redirect it in a healthy way. And sometimes, even if you don't have an agreement, you can be like, hey, I totally agree with you, but that's not what we're going to talk about today because this is important to me and I want to build a relationship with you because I like you, or say whatever you want to say. How can you win in the story situation since the audience is listening? He just said, like, finish the clients you already have, but just don't do that anymore. And he did, and it was fine. But it's important to know how to win. The last step is the consequence. And this is important because in the story, obviously, he was going to get fired. He didn't have to say that one, though. That was kind of more explicit in this story. Sometimes you don't always have to say it. Most of the time, you do. And the key thing is here, if you do not, if you decide on a consequence, which is something that you're going to move forward doing, or like leaving a relationship, or like leaving a job, something, it could be extreme like that, it could be minor. If you choose something and it comes down where you have to enact the consequence and you don't do it, you've completely wasted your time. In
Right.
fact, not only have you wasted your time, you've actually decreased your self-worth and self-respect in the eyes of the person. And they may not consciously know it, but unconsciously they will know, I will never take this person seriously to the level I once
Yeah.
did before.
Yeah.
And that is
That
not
is
good for you.
uh I think that's it's all very good advice, and I've seen the consequences of not following, especially that last piece where, speaking of, again, the whole topic today is about boundaries, but like there was somebody I worked with a few years back who had employees that were routinely violating basic policy.
Yes.
And, they weren't, they were all doing it, but one of them was the most egregious offender. And I said, you've got to have a conversation with that person that says, what you've been doing is grounds for dismissal. I'm not firing you right now, but this behavior has to get corrected immediately. And we literally had the conversation. They didn't, I mean, they changed for like 2 days and then they were back to the old behaviors again and nothing happened to them. And I said to the owner of the business, I'm like, this is going to completely undermine your ability to manage the rest of your team.
Yes.
And there's reasons I no longer work with that company.
Yes.
So because and it was like, well, I can't fire them right now. We're in our busy time. And I'm like,
Mm,
if everybody was doing the job the way they were supposed to, well, first of all, it would be an even busier time because you'd retain more clients. But yeah, I mean, it's if you I think that if you have boundaries and you demonstrate that when they're violated, that there's no consequence, then first of all, I would ask, do you really have those boundaries? And
yes.
second of all, in a way, why should they respect those boundaries if you're clearly not, advocating for them? So,
Yeah. You teach people how to treat you, and boundaries is how you do that.
I
And my experience is, my personal experience is when you hold boundaries with people, older friendships or family members, especially, and you are now like, I want to start holding boundaries because I'm at a new level of self worth, self respect that I'm going to practice. It is more difficult. to do with older friends who you are familiar with treating you, speaking to you, or in a certain way. Because who loves change?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Nobody, right.
Not a single freaking person in the world. Right? And so what you're doing is you're essentially like getting them to change and they hate it. And
Right.
so, and it's also very telling as well because when you hold a boundary with somebody and they get upset about your boundaries, that tells you a lot about them. Now, it's different about being frustrated, but if they like, I'm gonna like, if you find that like, I'm going to find ways to actively push your boundaries constantly, that's not a healthy relationship, healthy working relationship, family member. That's a whole
Yep.
conversation we could get into as well, but like something to keep in mind, kind of thing. And
Well, I know one thing you and I talked about um in our last podcast was like what's our going to be our word for the year for 2026. And one of the
yes,
reasons why, I said mine was going to be connection. And if you're going to have great connection, it comes with good boundaries. So,
I agree. Absolutely. And I think I said it last episode, but my word of the year is cultivate.
yeah.
Cultivating not just friendships, not just business relationships, but also new friendships
Yeah.
as well, and deepening the existing ones I have for sure. So, when we wrap up this episode, my question for you, Scott, is there anything that we should have said that we didn't say that you'd love the audience to hear related to giving too much, not giving enough, boundaries?
Well, I'm going to say something that I think is a big enough topic that we need to do probably a whole episode about it,
Sure.
or at least a big chunk of an episode about it, or talk with a guest about it.
Yeah.
But one of the big ways of boundary setting is telling, I do think that a lot of people are coming to any business owner never having done business with that kind of company before. Like, this is the first time we've ever built a house. This is the first time I've ever engaged a coach. This is the first time I've ever hired somebody to do my taxes.
Mm.
And it's actually really important at that point, I feel, to tell them this is what, this is how this is going to go.
Mm.
It actually inspires confidence that this is not your first rodeo. And it tells them you're actually signaling some boundaries inside that expectation setting. And I think too often we're so surrounded by what we do all the time that we start assuming everybody knows how this works. And then when they, you know, don't follow those expectations or they violate the boundaries or don't give us the information that we need to help them, we're like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, well, you never told them. Right. So
Yes,
I do think that like good, good expectation setting is probably a component of good boundaries and good client relationships.
I agree. And I think another rule of thumb on the topic of boundaries is how do you know when your boundaries are being crossed? Well, one example is your emotions.
Hmm.
So, anger is usually a good indicator. Sometimes sadness as well. I think there's obviously other ones too. Um, but like, I think one thing for me that I've struggled with was learning how to use anger in a healthy way.
Hmm.
And I'll say this real quick because I think it's related to the topic. Is I kind of grew up in an environment and a philosophy and way of being in the world where like I was taught incorrectly. I agree. I believe now that anger is bad. I know
Hmm.
that is silly thoughts. um, Unmanaged anger is not great. And the analogy I've come up with, or maybe I pierced it together with somebody else's thought, was, and I may have shared this before on the podcast. I'll say it again. Is anger is like fire, beautiful, important, necessary for development in life. If we didn't have fire, things wouldn't get done in a lot of ways. And but what can fire also do when it's out
Burn
of
everything to the
control? Yeah, it destroys relationships, it destroys homes, it can really hurt yourself. So fire or anger unmanaged is rage. And when kind of like a steam pressure, if you will, if you suppress it and let it out, it's going to come out really big and loud. That's what most people do with boundaries. You finally push me to the point where I'm going to say something about it. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. That is not connection building. That is destructive in a lot of ways. And it's also a sign of bringing awareness of like, that really pissed me off. Should I let it go? Should I say something? Is a whole nother conversation entirely. But like, if it happens more than once, maybe a couple times, say something before it becomes an issue where you like yelling at them in front of strangers. Yeah, right. So that's what I'll say about that is kind of a good tip of like, when is it a good idea to maybe have a boundary conversation with
If you
somebody?
notice that that's happening, it's
Yeah,
probably a good indication that you're not minding your boundaries very well.
very true. And that is a big takeaway. We'll kick off with 2026. How are your boundaries? How are we doing with them? How can you
Uh,
make them better? And if you ever want help with them, ask us. We do this for a living, professionally and and everything. We're here to help y'all. So,
Sometimes our own house is even a little bit in order about
well, yeah, very true.
it. Sometimes.
Very true. So, anywho, anything else that needs to be
Yeah.
said, Scott? Or shall we end
No,
it
it's
here?
been this has been fun. I'm looking forward to the our year in podcasting. I'm looking forward
Yes,
to having some more guests on now that the holidays are behind us and people's schedules are a little bit more settled down. So yeah,
absolutely.
it's gonna be a good year.
Can be a good year. Absolutely. Hope you all have a good kickoff to you and your holidays were great. Tune in next time. And if you like what you're hearing, give us a follow, comment, tell us what you love, tell us what you want more of, tell us what you don't like. I don't care. Tell us things. We want to hear it. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
All right, bye bye, everybody.